I mean, how long ago did you start focusing on your classical playing?
2002 or three, something like that.
Yeah. And what about classical saxophone was drew you? Like what about it made you want to spend all of those hours practicing that rep?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things in jazz and all other forms of music. Like there are times when the message has more uh, weight than the delivery,
Mm.
and so you can sometimes have sloppy technique, or you can have a certain kind of technique, like linear technique, where everything is, connected in bars of fours, eights, usually fours and eights, not more than fours and eights. And you can surround yourself with music that does not expose your weaknesses. Like in jazz, I mean, there are plenty of songs in the 20s and the 30s that would be very difficult for contemporary thinkers like us to play. We just avoid those songs and we play the stuff we know. But when you're playing classical music and the piece is written, you can't change the key. You can't really deviate from the tempo significantly. You can't find a way to tailor the song to your strength. You have to address your weaknesses. And I was at this point as a musician where, I mean, I was playing jazz and I knew what I was doing and I was pretty good at it. So, I mean, what is it that I can practice that's going to make me better? Because if you start learning scales, the scales are all the same. They're just scales. So you become good at playing scales. But it's not like playing scales challenges your conception about music and makes you feel like you're the worst player on the planet. They're just scales. But when I started playing classical music, I mean, I just felt like I was the worst player on the planet. It was great. It was great because I was just exposed. I mean, I didn't have as much control of the instrument as I thought I did. Uh, I could play loud, but I couldn't play soft. I couldn't play downbeats worth a damn because we don't have to play downbeats. We never do play downbeats. How many
Mm.
times do you have a band and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, bang? It just the drummer plays bop, bop, da, bing, and you start playing. I mean, it's never you never have to play on the beat. So for about two
Mm.
weeks, I couldn't even play a downbeat like on the beat. So there were a lot of things. It changed my tone uh, because we tend to play 4 and 8 bar phrases. Uh, Anything longer than that, your tone starts to waver. We don't play ballads. We don't play them softly. So holding a long note for more than 10 seconds, the tone starts to waver. There's all these things I started to notice. And I was at that age where if I didn't find something, I mean, if you don't find something to challenge you, then you just kind of drop off. Because, I mean, am I really going to go home and practice a blues or go home and practice a tune? I mean, I know how to play the tunes. What am I practicing? What am I practicing for? Just
Mm.
to practice? I mean, so you listen to records of great jazz musicians when they're getting in their older age, and a lot of times those records don't sound very good. Coleman Hawkins being a fantastic exception to that, and Sonny Rollins for a very long time being an exception to that. But yeah, I just wanted to avoid the slippery slope. I wanted to avoid the drop off. There was never in my mind an idea or a possibility to actually play concerts. That wasn't part of my thinking at all. I don't know how that happened. But when it started, I said, okay, this is going to suck, but I'll do it. And then I got better even quicker, because the pressure of that situation is quite amazing. It's an amazing situation to be in. And I was surrounded by a lot of really kind, people like, James Bunty and Tim McAllister and Arno Bornkamp in the Netherlands and Niels Bale from the Netherlands. A lot of players. Harvey Patel was my teacher. Uh, James Umble, who's over at Youngstown State. I mean, there's all these they were really kind. I'm leaving out people because Joe Luloff at Michigan State. I mean, a lot of people tried to help me and talk to me and gave me advice. So it's been a really good experience. It's been a long, painful process, but it's paid off.
So one thing I think this is a lot of people, once they get to a certain point in their career and their knowledge of something, are not willing to sort of be broken down to the studs to be built back up.
Right.
I think it says something about your character, what kind of person you are, to be able to handle that even.
It's tricky because by implication, it implies that the people that don't do it have no character or have bad character. You know what I mean? So I don't think of it in those terms. I just think that one of the things I noticed when I moved to New York was that a lot of musicians, their relationship with music in general was rather transactional. They were trying to find a niche or something they could specialize in that they could monetize.
Right.
But I just have always been this guy who loved playing music, and I played with 100% enthusiasm, whether it was the R&B band I played in from 1974 to 1979, it was just, or Wynton's band, or even when I didn't know how to play jazz well, I loved the idea of playing it, and I would study it and practice it and learn solos and try to get better. I was never really trying to find like one or two things I did that nobody else did that I could claim for myself so that I could declare myself an innovator and find a way to monetize it. It was never part of my thing. I think that's more what it is. It's just, I like playing music, and kind of exhilarating, especially when everybody's trying to tell you how good you are. It's kind of exhilarating to be broken down like that and starting over. That was great. I mean, it made me better for sure. In a lot of ways, it probably kept my career on an upward trajectory rather than a downward trajectory or just a plateau.
That's interesting. So, I mean, I hadn't played any classical saxophone for 14 or 15 years.
Right.
Because, once I finished my master's degree, there was really no work. There's not a lot of work for classical saxophone.
Oh, it's true.
So, and since the jazz part of my career had developed the way that it had, and I had been doing so much stuff that way, it was sort of like the path of least resistance to, to capitalize on that.
Right.
And so when I went back to work on this doctorate in saxophone performance, and I hadn't played any classical saxophone, it was in some ways it was a rude awakening.
Yeah.
And yeah, and having to deal with, doing basic things that you think that you ought to be able to do, but for whatever reason, they're just not there. And all of the time associated, the different embouchure. One thing I did was, during the time I was playing all the recitals and stuff I had to do, I stopped playing alto in a jazz or commercial context.
Right.
So it was all tenor in that context, so that I could totally separate what the alto was. So when I felt an alto, it would help me to dial into that part of my brain.
Right.
And I played on a different horn, obviously a different setup. I even had a different neck strap because I wanted to really make myself feel differently when I played classical. And I didn't want to kind of do it. If I'm going to do this, I want to really do it.
Right.
And that's the way that I tend to be with most things, sometimes to my detriment, because, you know, you only have so much time. Right. So you have to kind of choose at some point. But I remember the first recital I did after, like I said, having not played any classical music for, I mean, I was, you know, I would practice etudes and stuff every once in a while, but I'm talking about getting on the stage, you know, performance ready.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah. So 14, 15 years, I play a recital. Man, I was nervous.
That's the only time I've ever been nervous on a bandstand.
Man, I was so nervous. I was so nervous. I'll tell you, you know, one thing I talk to my students about is knowing what your tendencies are when you get nervous, so that you can try to devise some strategies that will counteract those, and also so that you're not surprised by them.
Right.
And then that'll make it worse. So for me, one of my tendencies is I get dehydrated because the adrenaline starts to flow, and then it burns up every ounce of water in my body. Now, once I know that I'm thirsty, it's too late. Mm-hmm. Because what starts to happen is I lose control of the muscles in my face. And I mean, I can't play anything. And so I was going to make sure that was not going to happen to me. So I drank 2 32-ounce Powerades. I drank like 2 water bottles, or 2 or 3 water bottles, and that was before the recital. Then during the recital, I drank like 2 more water bottles because I wasn't going to have that happen to me. I was still nervous as all get out, but it was, yeah, it's a different thing. And being able to kind of go and study with someone where I didn't have to be on, I didn't have to be the person teaching or providing any information, I could just sit there and learn, right, was quite refueling, and it just, I needed it more than I realized I did.